In the earliest centuries of the Japanese archipelago, when mountain ridges disappeared into morning mist and villages clung to the edges of dense forests, the spear already stood as one of the defining symbols of the land's emerging warrior culture. Long before the sword would be celebrated in tales and poetry, Japan was spoken of as the land of 1,000 halberds, a name born from the sight of countless long-shafted weapons rising in shrines, guarding crude wooden gates, and resting inside the houses of warriors who lived by vigilance and readiness. The spear embodied the rhythm of early Japan, a world shaped by seasonal storms, rival chieftains, migrating clans, and the constant need to maintain distance and control during conflict. It was through these long, precise weapons that the first communities learned to defend fields, settlements, and sacred places, turning the spear into a quiet but unshakable foundation of martial order. Chinese influence played a decisive role in shaping the earliest Japanese polearms. Through envoys, traders, and wandering craftsmen, knowledge of metalworking and military construction traveled across the sea, bringing with it the prototype of the hoko, an early halberd-like spear with a broad blade mounted on a wooden shaft. These first hoko were functional rather than elegant, yet they carried the solemnity of foreign craftsmanship and immediately earned respect for their ability to extend a warrior's reach and strengthen defensive formations. As Japanese smiths experimented with blade shapes, fittings, and the balance between shaft flexibility and rigidity, the spear evolved from a simple imported concept into an indigenous weapon deeply intertwined with the land's shifting political structure. Over time, this process produced new forms, the straight, piercing yari and the sweeping, curved naginata, each reflecting different needs on the battlefield and in ceremonial life. With the rise of organized clans and the emerging class of bushi, the spear became central to both training and strategy. Dojos of the early martial tradition echoed with the sound of wooden shafts striking dry floors as students repeated thrusts, blocks, and sweeping motions under the guidance of silent, disciplined practice. Techniques were not preserved through written manuals, but through the body, through posture, breath, tension, and the unbroken concentration required to control a weapon whose effectiveness depended on flawless timing. The spear demanded patience rather than rage, calculation rather than brute strength, and an unyielding awareness of distance, for its purpose lay not in reckless assault, but in the steady domination of space. Every thrust carried the weight of discipline. Every guarded stance communicated readiness. On battlefields of early Japan, long before the sword gained romantic distinction, the spear shaped the logic of movement and tactics. Rows of yari determined the pace of an advance, held narrow mountain passes, and broke cavalry charges before they could gain momentum. The precision of spear formations created an invisible architecture of war, allowing commanders to orchestrate attacks and defenses with a clarity impossible in close-range combat. Even as the weapon served in warfare, it retained ceremonial significance, appearing in rituals, shrine processions, and the solemn duties of guarding gateways and fortifications. Its presence blended practical necessity with spiritual resonance, symbolizing vigilance, continuity, and the unwavering discipline expected of those entrusted with the protection of their clan. Yet this early stage marked only the beginning of the spear's transformation. As Japan entered new eras of warfare and refinement, the spear would divide into specialized forms, each fulfilling a unique role and carrying techniques that demanded deeper mastery. The evolution from hoko to yari and naginata would reveal a far more intricate story, one that awaited unfolding in the next chapter, where the diversity of spear types would reshape the entire understanding of samurai martial culture.
The evolution of the samurai spear unfolded across centuries of refinement, where each transformation reflected the shifting realities of warfare and the changing ideals of the warrior class. The earliest form, the hoko, stood as a bridge between imported continental design and the archipelago's own martial identity. Its broad, halberd-like blade, fixed securely to a relatively short shaft, served as both chopping instrument and thrusting tool, allowing early warriors to confront armored opponents with a weapon that balanced weight and authority. The hoko revealed the first attempts to unite the reach of a polearm with the cutting force of a blade, yet its construction remained heavy, its form somewhat rigid, a weapon of an age when battles were small and personal, dictated by clashes of individuals rather than sweeping formations. Over time, the limitations of this early design became clear, and the demand for greater versatility gave rise to the next, more refined generation of spearcraft. From this need emerged the yari, the straight-bladed spear that would soon dominate the military landscape of feudal Japan. The design was deceptively simple, a long wooden shaft crowned with the sharply tapered steel point, but its effectiveness lay in balance, precision, and the ability to extend a warrior's presence far beyond the reach of a sword. The yari's blade could take many shapes: triangular heads for piercing armor, leaf-shaped forms for cutting, or multifaceted points that delivered powerful thrusting force with seamless control. Its shaft, often crafted from sturdy hardwood such as oak or magnolia, was strengthened with layers of lacquer to resist moisture and warping, while decorative metal fittings reinforced the joints and added the unmistakable aesthetic associated with samurai craftsmanship. In the hands of trained warriors, the yari enabled the creation of disciplined phalanx-like formations, where unity of movement mattered more than individual ambition, giving battlefields a new sense of structure and momentum. In a different direction evolved the naginata, a weapon that blended the distinct identities of sword and spear into a single, elegant form. Its curved blade, mounted on a long, polished shaft, allowed both sweeping cuts and defensive arcs, making it ideal for keeping multiple opponents at bay. The curvature granted reach and fluidity, while the shaft provided leverage that amplified the power of each motion. Unlike the direct thrusting intent of the yari, the naginata embodied a more circular, flowing approach to combat, where wide slashes, spiraling maneuvers, and evasive pivots defined its movement. With shafts crafted from resilient woods and blades forged by swordsmiths who treated the weapon with the same reverence given to katana, the naginata became both a battlefield instrument and an emblem of refinement within certain lineages of the samurai class. Lacquer finishes, braided grips, and ornate pommels turned each piece into a personal treasure reflecting the identity of its owner. The variety of spear types reflected the variability of Japanese warfare itself. Shorter spears allowed close-quarter grappling, heavier-bladed versions served in fortress defense, and ceremonial spears bore elaborate phoenix, dragon, or lotus motifs that marked the rank and prestige of the guard who carried them. Some shafts were wrapped in dyed leather or rattan fibers for grip, while others bore polished surfaces that shimmered under sunlight during formal processions. Even the simplest battlefield yari held within its construction a philosophy of craftsmanship, discipline, and respect for the materials, principles considered inseparable from the spirit of the bushi. Despite these refined forms, the evolution of the spear was far from complete. With every improvement in metallurgy, every shift in battlefield tactics, and every newly formed martial school, spear design continued to adapt. The next stage of this story revealed how technique, training, and combat application transformed these weapons from mere tools into extensions of the warrior's intent, a transformation explored in the coming chapter where the world of ryu, duels, and traveling masters awaited.
The development of spear technique in Japan created a distinct martial culture in which discipline, geometry, and rhythm shaped every movement on the training ground and every decision on the battlefield. As warfare intensified and samurai households expanded their military retinues, ryu, devoted specifically to spear mastery, began to appear across the provinces, each with its own philosophy, favored weapon design, and method of instruction. Among the most influential were the Hozoin, Shinkage, and Owari schools, each born from generations of observation, experimentation, and transmission. In these schools, spear combat was neither chaos nor simple extension of brute force. It was a study of angles, breadth, and timing, where even the smallest shift of weight or tightening of grip could determine the path of a fight. The spear demanded from the practitioner not only technical ability, but a mind trained to remain unbroken under pressure. Within the discipline of yari jutsu, the art of the straight spear, the emphasis lay on directness and clarity. Practitioners learned to maintain distance through sharp thrusts that shot forward like the release of pent-up air, their power generated not by the arms alone, but by coordinated movement from the hips through the length of the shaft. The yari became an instrument of control, dominating the space between opponents and preventing advances before they could gather momentum. Defensive techniques relied on small deflections, subtle redirections, and the ability to slide the shaft in the hands with swift precision. Training sessions echoed with the dry impact of wood against wood and the low, steady commands of instructors who demanded unwavering repetition until the body internalized the rhythm of attack and withdrawal. Yurijutsu favored the battlefield, where lines of spearmen moved as a single organism, their discipline turning disorder into formation. By contrast, naginata jutsu carried a different spirit, expressed through wide, sweeping motions that used the weight of the curved blade to cut in large arcs. The naginata did not merely thrust, it carved space, controlling opponents through slashes that forced them to retreat or reposition. Its techniques required fluidity, the ability to shift stance seamlessly, and sensitivity to how momentum flowed along the weapon's long shaft. Spinning maneuvers, circular parries, and diagonal cuts allowed practitioners to face multiple attackers or break through spear formations. The curved blade amplified reach while enabling deceptive changes in direction, turning each technique into a blend of elegance and danger. Where Yurijutsu emphasized linear lines, naginata jutsu explored spirals, curves, and transitions, creating a visual and tactical contrast that defined the weapon's unique identity. Beyond the structured environment of the dojo, spear arts were sharpened through duels, demonstrations, and the journeys of traveling warriors who carried their school's reputation from province to province. Encounters on lonely mountain roads, challenges exchanged during the gatherings of martial families, and the constant search for refinement pushed these techniques to their limits. Masters often sought opponents who employed different weapons, swords, shorter spears, or even early polearms, believing that understanding contrasting styles was the key to achieving true mastery. In such contests, the spear's versatility proved its value. The ability to shift from long thrusts to close-quarter grappling, from defensive spins to sudden counters, made it one of the most adaptable weapons in the samurai arsenal. Yet the full depth of spear mastery extended beyond technique, deep into the psychological and spiritual realm. Practitioners trained their breathing to remain steady under pressure, their gaze to stay focused, even when surrounded, and their posture to convey readiness without aggression. The spear demanded clarity of mind, for hesitation or emotional turbulence could disrupt the timing that the weapon required. Through countless hours of repetition, warriors learned to control fear, silence impulse, and unify body and intention, qualities that define the very heart of samurai discipline. And still, the story of the spear did not solely belong to men on the battlefield. Another tradition grew quietly within the walls of samurai households, a tradition that shaped the identity of generations of women whose training carried its own dignity and purpose. That path unfolded in the next chapter, where the naginata became the emblem of resilience, grace, and inherited honor. Within the households of the samurai class, far from the clamor of battlefields, the naginata became a symbol of dignity, lineage, and inner strength, forming an art that shaped generations of women whose role in the warrior world extended far beyond domestic responsibility. Training often began in childhood, when young daughters of samurai families learned to handle the long, curved-bladed weapon with the same seriousness expected of men studying the spear or the sword. The naginata was not given to inspire aggression, it was entrusted as an instrument of protection, a guardian of the home, the children,
and the family honor at times when men were away on campaigns. Its length allowed women to keep distance from armored intruders, while its sweeping arcs made it possible to confront more physically powerful opponents. For this reason, martial training became an inseparable part of the upbringing of samurai women, embedding discipline, balance, and emotional composure into their daily lives. The atmosphere of women's dojos differed from the stern intensity of male spear schools, yet carried the same rigorous expectations. Training halls echoed with the rustle of long sleeves, the steady breath of synchronized movement, and the clean sweep of wooden practice naginata cutting through still air. Instructors emphasized elegance and precision, teaching that strength flowed not from force, but from posture, footwork, and the correct angle of rotation. The long shaft required the practitioner to rely on body coordination rather than brute power, making every drill a study in control. Through repetitive patterns, circular movements, and diagonal transitions, students learned to manage distance, govern their center of gravity, and maintain sharp awareness of every direction around them. This refined approach created a unique aesthetic, a fusion of grace and lethality that became the hallmark of women's naginata jutsu. Historical legends further elevated the status of this art. Stories of Keisa Gozen, renowned for her courage and unwavering resolve, and accounts of women who defended their homes during periods of civil unrest infused the naginata with a strong sense of moral purpose. Such figures embodied the belief that honor was not limited to men on the battlefield, it extended to anyone trained to protect what must not be lost. Tales of widows who held castle gates against invading forces, of daughters who stood guard through long nights of siege, and of wives who maintained vigilance while their husbands served their lords, created a legacy that resonated throughout the samurai world. These were not myths carved for embellishment, but reflections of a culture where the lines between domestic life and warfare often blurred. Martial schools dedicated specifically to the naginata developed distinct lineages and teaching traditions. Some focused on wide sweeping cuts and defensive positioning, suitable for protecting narrow corridors or household entrances. Others emphasized refined footwork, rapid turns, and long-range arcs, crafted to keep multiple opponents at bay. Each school passed down its techniques through carefully preserved kata that blended strategy with philosophy, teaching that vigilance, humility, and calm determination formed the foundation of a warrior spirit, regardless of gender. Mastery of these forms required unwavering dedication, and many women continued training throughout adulthood regarding the naginata as both a physical discipline and an inheritance of identity. In time, the naginata became one of the defining symbols of samurai femininity, a weapon that reflected a balance between beauty and resolve. Its refined appearance, lacquered shaft, braided grips, polished curvature, concealed the power it could wield when guided by trained hands. Yet despite this harmony of elegance and danger, the story of the naginata within women's culture represented only one aspect of the broader transformation of the spear tradition. As Japan moved through eras of political upheaval and cultural reform, the role of polearms expanded far beyond combat, taking on ceremonial, ritualistic, and administrative functions that reshaped their meaning in a rapidly modernizing world. That transformation unfolded in the next chapter, where the spear stepped away from the battlefield and into the realm of symbolism, ritual, and changing national identity.
In the later centuries of the samurai era, the spear stepped beyond the boundaries of battlefield necessity and entered the realm of ritual, ceremony, and public order, becoming an instrument through which authority and cultural continuity were expressed. Within castle complexes, long yari and ornate naginata were carried by guards whose duty extended not only to defense, but to the projection of dignity and discipline. These weapons, often adorned with lacquered shafts, engraved fittings, and polished metal accents, marked the presence of rank and responsibility, indicating not merely the warrior's readiness for combat, but his participation in the tradition that fused martial vigilance with ceremonial decorum. During official processions, rows of spearmen marched in strict rhythm, their blades catching the sunlight, turning the simple act of escort into a display of order in a society where hierarchy governed every gesture. Beyond the castles, specialized forms of spears evolved for policing and civil control. Tools such as the sasumata, a forked implement designed to pin and immobilize without killing, and the soregarami, equipped with barbs to entangle clothing, reflected a shift in martial philosophy from lethal force to controlled restraint. These polearms were wielded by officials of city patrols and magistrate offices, where the goal was to apprehend fugitives or quell disturbances, while minimizing unnecessary bloodshed. Their construction mirrored that of battlefield weapons, built from sturdy woods and reinforced with metal, yet their function revealed a society seeking balance between discipline and stability. The spear, once a symbol of battlefield ferocity, became an instrument of civic order, quietly integrating itself into the daily governance of towns and castle towns across Japan. Ceremonial spears also became integral to religious observances and seasonal rites. In Shinto festivals, long-bladed hoko adorned with paper streamers or bright cloth represented purity and divine presence, carried during processions to honor deities or to mark the boundaries of sacred space. The spear served not merely as a weapon, but as a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms, guiding participants through rituals that affirmed communal identity. Such ceremonial usage preserved ancient symbolism, reminding observers that the lineage of polearms reached deep into the earliest layers of Japanese culture, far preceding the era of armored cavalry and clan warfare. Through these practices, the spear maintained its connection to origins rooted in myth, agriculture, and the guardianship of sacred sites. With the arrival of the Meiji Restoration in the late 19th century, the traditional warrior class dissolved, and with it, the practical military use of spears on the battlefield came to an abrupt end. Western-style firearms and new military doctrines rendered polearms obsolete, and many of the old dojos faded into silence as samurai families lost their privileges in martial roles. Yet the art of the spear did not vanish. Instead, it transformed. Schools preserved kata as cultural heritage, shifting their focus from combat effectiveness to the cultivation of discipline, balance, and inner stillness. Training halls became spaces where ancient techniques lived on, not as tools of war, but as pathways toward understanding one's own body and mind. In this form, the spear found renewed purpose, offering practitioners a connection to a past that continued to shape the identity of modern Japan. Despite this transformation, the most profound layer of spear tradition lay not in ceremony or policing, but in the enduring philosophy that accompanied its practice. The next chapter revealed how this art, stripped from battlefield context, evolved into a means of discovering harmony between body, spirit, and the universe itself, a spiritual heritage that survived long after the clash of armies had faded into memory.
In modern Japan, the legacy of the spear endures, not as a relic preserved only behind glass, or as a memory bound to chronicles, but as a living discipline that continues to shape the character and inner world of those who practice it. The battlefield has long fallen silent, yet the spear's lineage survives in refined forms such as naginata, sojutsu, and jojutsu, each carrying a fragment of the ancient warrior spirit into contemporary life. Within bright, polished dojos, where the scent of tatami replaces the dust of the old training grounds, practitioners repeat movements once honed in armor, now pursued as pathways toward balance and clarity. Every thrust, sweep, and turn retains the philosophy that guided generations of Bushi, that mastery of a weapon begins only when one masters the restlessness within oneself. This continuity allows the spear to transcend the sharp, practical function it once served and become a medium through which discipline and self-awareness take root. The modern forms of spear arts emphasize more than technique. They cultivate an understanding of how the body aligns with intention, how breath shapes rhythm, and how awareness connects a practitioner to the space around them. In naginata practice, wide circular arcs echo the elegance of the past, while structured kata preserve the mental composure that once defined the samurai household. In sojutsu, the straight spear's directness becomes a study of precision and presence, where the simplest motion carries the teaching that strength lies in calm, deliberate action. Even jojutsu, derived from the practical need to disarm and control, embodies the subtle moral principles that guided earlier police polearms, showing how restraint, clarity, and respect form the heart of martial ethics. Each discipline carries a quiet reminder that true skill manifests not in domination, but in harmonious alignment of intention, technique, and awareness. Beyond physical training, the spiritual heritage of spear arts reaches into the deeper philosophy that shaped Japanese martial culture. The spear taught that every action has direction, consequence, and weight, that one moment of imbalance, whether physical or emotional, can disrupt the entire encounter. Practitioners learn to navigate conflict not through aggression, but through the stillness that allows decisive movement. This understanding echoes the teachings of early Ryu, where instructors emphasized that control of the weapon reflected control of the self. The spear becomes not an extension of violence, but a mirror, revealing impatience, tension, or fear, and offering a method through which these impulses can be refined. In this way, the ancient art becomes a modern discipline of introspection, guiding practitioners toward a unity of body and thought. The symbolic meaning of the spear endures as well. Museums display yari with blades polished to a soft shine, their long shafts bearing traces of lacquer worn smooth by generations of hands. Ceremonial hoko appear in festivals, evoking the earliest guardianship rituals of shrines. Naginata demonstrations gather audiences who see not a weapon, but a flowing tradition that transforms steel and wood into movement imbued with cultural memory. These displays remind viewers that the spear shaped far more than warfare. It influenced aesthetics, etiquette, and the rhythm of collective life. Its discipline became a quiet structure that supported communities and expressed ideals of duty, vigilance, and inner composure. As the story of the spear reaches its conclusion, its enduring message becomes clear. A true master does not seek the destruction of an enemy, but seeks balance in every motion, in every intention, in every breath. The spear, once raised on battlefields, now guides those who pursue harmony rather than conflict, clarity rather than chaos. Through its continued practice, the ancient connection between body, spirit, and the universe remains unbroken, offering modern practitioners the same insight that shaped the lives of warriors centuries ago. And within this living heritage, the spear retains its timeless purpose, not as a weapon of war, but as a path toward understanding one's place in the silent, ever-moving world.